So a couple episodes ago in the Since That Time Forgot, we covered the Casio CZ-1000, and I was really impressed at how nice and rich it sounds. And as I was exploring the CZ series a little bit more, I came across the CZ-3000, which has an analog chorus chip in it, and I had to ask, is it worth the extra money? Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Zach Marr from Alamo Music here in San Antonio, Texas. You can find us online at alamomusic.com. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, turn on your notifications. This is our Alamo Sound Lab channel, where we talk about all things music tech related. And today we're talking about the Casio CZ-3000 and asking the question, is it worth it? And specifically, we covered the CZ series in a video on the CZ-1000 and talked about Casio's somewhat forgotten contribution to early digital synthesis technology. During the time of the dominance of the DX7, Casio released their phase distortion synthesizers that were budget, super inexpensive, and ended up being a lot of people's first budget digital synth. And really interesting pieces. They sound incredibly warm for being digital synthesizers, and they're kind of had a resurgence of interest. There's a lot of people that swear by the sound. I was reading about it. The reason I got interested in the first place is I was seeing people sing their praises, and I had to try one out. And I was really impressed by the sound. And when I was reading about it, I found that they had kind of pro models or flagship models, the CZ-5000, the CZ-3000. And I was curious, on the resale market, there's not a huge price difference between the 1000, the 101, and these higher end models, the 3000 and the 5000, and I think a CZ1, which is the ultimate flagship. And I wanted to grab one and explore it and see how different it was. If you are interested in more information about phase distortion and the history of the Casio early digital synths, refer to our other video. We cover that there. I did want to correct one thing that I said about phase distortion. There's, I guess, kind of a misbelief that phase distortion was Casio's kind of way around patent of FM synthesis, but I was reading more about it, and I'm going to grab my phone and read a Reddit description where someone is describing the differences between FM and phase distortion. It's over my head. I'm going to reference the username and read it because I think it sort of makes sense. There's a lot of math, and it's actually like an equation, so you should check it out if you're interested. But the exact quote is, this is from Sean Luke on Reddit, and he says, while both methods modify the phase of an outgoing signal, Casio's PD method has very little to do with FM synthesis, and the effects are entirely different. In the Yamaha case, the modulator is added to the existing frequency multiplied by time to shift the phase or frequency in a cyclical fashion. In Casio's case, the modulator entirely determines the phase of the carrier, if we can even use that terminology. Phase distortion is best thought of not as a variation of FM, but rather as a variation of wave shaping. In normal wave shaping, a wave is modified by passing it through a shaper function to produce the final result. In phase distortion, it's the opposite. A shaper function is being passed into the wave instead of the raw time. And then he has an equation. Again, look it up if you're interested in it. It sort of made sense to me. It definitely involved kind of equations, and I kind of remember that from back when I was in school, but a little over my head. But I thought that was helpful, that it's incorrect to say that it is just another version of FM that got around patent law. It actually was its own thing. And when you program these and play with them, you get a sense of how different it is than FM. It's actually a little bit more friendly, I think, than FM, and definitely has its own tone and kind of characteristics. So I wanted to correct that piece of information. So what do you get in the CZ-3000 that you don't get in the entry-level models, in the CZ-1000 and 101? So one, build quality. The CZ-1000 that we got feels a lot, it's got membrane buttons, it feels flimsier, it's lighter, it's missing, the buttons here feel a lot more reliable to me than the membrane buttons on the CZ-1000. You also get key split, you get 4 extra voices of polyphony, you also get more memory as well as a stereo chorus, which is analog, which I think is really cool. That was one of the things that I was interested in about this model. I was like, oh, I wonder what an analog chorus would sound like with this digital kind of synth underneath it. And it's noisy, you know, it's not a very clean analog chorus, but I really like the way it adds to the kind of Casio sound, the fundamental sound. And in addition to that, what it's missing from the CZ-5000, it's missing the sequencer, which apparently was a pain to use anyways. It was a pretty full-featured sequencer, but not the easiest to use, so it's missing that. It has the key split mode, so you weren't able to do that in the CZ-1000 and in the 101. And I think it just has more of the, let me see what else. I can't remember if it has portamento and glide on the CZ-1000. I think it might, but that's a good question. I can clarify in the comments below on that. But other than that, it's pretty similar. So the question is it worth the maybe extra $100 from a CZ-1000 or CZ-101? And I'm going to get to that, but first we're going to demo it so you can hear it. Not going to play anything super complex. There's hundreds of patches online. I haven't had a chance to explore those. I'm just kind of playing with a few presets to give you a sense of the sound if you haven't watched the other video. But let's play it, and then we'll conclude with some final thoughts as to whether it's worth it. So there you have it, the CZ-3000. One point of note, it doesn't have aftertouch, it doesn't have a velocity sensitivity. That was a ding against it at the time. There's some arguments about when it was actually released into the market. Usually people say 86, but it did show up in ads and brochures in 85, late 85. Not entirely sure when it was actually released into the marketplace. One point of fact that I think is interesting, it uses the terminology DCO for its oscillators, and I think maybe this was the source when people say DCO and they are confused as to whether it's digital or analog. I guess at this time it wasn't clear what a DCO actually was. There were digitally controlled analog oscillators, and then there was Casio's DCOs, which were actually digital oscillators. And I think that's maybe where confusion around that term might have originated. So interesting piece of history there that this is a DCO, really it's a DO, digital oscillator, but they called it a DCO for what it's worth. And I do think it's worth it. I looked just right before this video, what are these going for online versus a CZ-1000, and the difference in price was often like $100, if that. So I think you get a lot more bang for your buck. This is a lot more sturdy than a CZ-1000 or a 101. It's got a bigger key bed. Maybe that's a downside for some people because maybe you want the 49 key instead of the 61 key, but it's heavy too. So that's another thing. It's a little heavier, it's sturdier, probably holds up better, and you get the analog chorus, which I think is really nice, and the extra voices and polyphony. So to me, it's a no-brainer. It's way better to buy one of these than one of the CZ-1000s or 101. That's just my thoughts. Would love to hear yours. These are still, when I get in trouble when I say cheap, and it's over $300. I think they're going for $500 to $700. And for vintage synths, I would say that's on the cheaper end of things. And there's definitely a community of people that love this. There's a lot of patches. It has MIDI, which is nice. So you can, and I think you can download patches fairly easily into these models. So that's my thoughts. Would love to hear. If I left something out, please leave a comment below. Would love to hear your thoughts. And until next time.